Everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we are into a beading frenzy. This is the March Bargain Bead Box 2023 edition, and I have been beading my little heart out. So I have beaded together quite a few pieces. Most of it is beaded. There's only one piece that has a little bit of memory wire. Very simple to do, so if you don't mind working with a slight bit of memory wire, the piece turned out beautiful, so it's very easy. All these pieces are very easy. I've done my usual PDF videos or PDF tutorials. So without further ado, let's get into this video. Okay, for my first piece, I used number one. Number one in the collection is the 5.5 by 6 millimeter hematite man-made chevron beads. That'd be these ones here. I used number 3 by 2 millimeter brass oval chain. That's this chain here. Now this chain came with the collection. Number 4 millimeter corrugated bicone spacer beads. Now these ones are right in the middle here. You can't really see them. I'll pull you in a little bit closer maybe. Okay. There, you're a little bit closer. You can see the spacer beads. And I use them in here, in between these beads here. Number 7, the 28 by 15 millimeter 18 karat gold plated filigree teardrop pendant, and that's this one here, not this black one in the back, just this one in the front here. Number 11, the 17 by 11 millimeter stainless steel open teardrop charms, so that'd be these ones here. Number 12, the 8 millimeter glass pearl beads. Now these glass pearl beads are in green, so those ones there. Number 14, the 10 millimeter crystal faceted barrel beads, and that's these big ones here. And number 15, the 37 by 21 millimeter black agate faceted teardrop pendant. So if you look here, I added that just behind this filigree pendant here. So that's this one here. And I used my own jump rings, so 5 millimeter jump rings to hold these together, my 11/0 seed beads to design the actual necklace part. And unfortunately, I forgot to use a clasp on the back, but I will fix that. But yeah, I forgot to do that. So I did do a mini PDF tutorial for you to show you how to design this necklace. So let's get to it. In this frame here, you can see how I'm threading these beads on. So this will be your first row. So I'm using a barrel bead, 3 11/0 seed beads, the spacer bead, 3 11/0 seed beads, and a barrel bead, and I go across, all the way across. Now I've used 10 beads, 10 barrel beads for this necklace. Now you can use more or less if you want. Just make sure there's an even amount of beads on either side. And as you can see in the middle where I've decided to add the pendant, I only put 6 11/0 seed beads. I bypassed the spacer bead completely because that's where I want to put the pendant in the future. So you don't want the spacer bead in there because it's just going to, it'll offset the pendant and won't sit exactly where you want it to, right in the middle. So when I get to the end, I thread on 6 11/0 seed beads, and then I bypass those, go back down through that barrel bead that I just came up, and now we're going to start the pattern. Now in this next frame, you can see I already did one chevron sequence there, but that's okay. It all works out the same. So when you're coming out of that barrel bead, you add 5 11/0 seed beads and the chevron bead, and then 1 11/0 seed bead. And when you add the 1 11/0 seed bead, you come back around, you bypass that seed bead, the first one, and you go back through your chevron bead from the bottom up, and you add your next chevron bead, 1 11/0 seed bead, come back around, go through the bottom of the next chevron bead, bypassing the 11/0 seed bead, and then go through the first seed bead of the first sequence on the right hand side where that other chevron bead is. Then you add 4 11/0 seed beads, and then you go through the barrel bead next to it, and you continue like that. When you're doing your chevron sequences, when you get to this part here, now you see that I've already added the filigree teardrop pendant and the black agate faceted teardrop pendant together. So now I've just put them together with a 5mm jump ring and just added it to the middle here. But before you do that, just take your needle and go through that barrel bead, the 6 11/0 seed beads, the barrel bead, and then continue with your chevron sequences all the way to the end. Now if you want to, you can put this on. I just put it on early. I wanted to see what it was going to look like, how it was going to sit. It does sit really nice, so you can continue on with your chevron sequences. I'm just going to stop in the middle here, but as you can see, I just slightly bent the chevron filigree pendant so it would fit around the agate underneath it a little bit better. So if you go back, you'll see that it just kind of sits and hugs the agate underneath. So that's why I wanted to bend it. So you've got to be really careful. Just bend it ever so slightly. What I did was I put my whole thumb right on the pendant and just kind of bent it around my thumb just ever so slightly. You don't want a big curve in it, you just want a slight little curve in it, but it just makes it fit a little better on, you know, on top of the black agate. I had to tie off my thread and get a new piece. So I did start at the right hand side again. As you can see here, this will be your second row, adding the 8mm glass pearl beads. So in this frame you can see what I've done. I'm just going to show you how I did that. So basically you take your needle and you come down through the first barrel bead, through the 5 11/0 seed beads, and you go through the chevron bead and the 1 11/0 seed bead to the left of your sequence. So as you can see in this frame here, I've started at the left of the chevron sequence, and I add 2 11/0 seed beads, one of the 8mm glass pearl beads, 2 11/0 seed beads. I go through the next 11/0 seed bead to the left, but on the right hand side of that chevron sequence. So you go through that seed bead, and then you just make your way across. So you go through the chevron, through the other chevron. You can bypass those 11/0 seed beads on the next chevron sequence, go through the next 11/0 seed bead that's on the bottom of the left hand chevron, and then you continue that way all the way across. As you can see here, I've finished my first row there. I'm making my way up through the 5 11/0 seed beads, the barrel bead, and then I'm going to go through the 6 11/0 seed beads, the next barrel bead, and I'm going to make my way down the 5 11/0 seed beads on the other side of that barrel, through the left side of the chevron there, the 11/0 seed bead, and I'm going to continue with my 2 11/0 seed beads until you've got 3 8mm glass pearl beads on the other side as well. In this frame you can see that I'm done now with the second row, and this is where I'm sitting now that I'm done that second row with the glass beads. I'm coming out that 11/0 seed bead. Now I added 10 11/0 seed beads, and I'm going back through that 11/0 seed bead that I came through at the end there. You can see that I'm going back through it again, and the chevron bead. And you just take your thread and you make it your way across. You can go through the 8mm glass pearl beads, the 3 11/0 seed beads, the chevron bead, until I get to this one here. Now this is the second one. So from here, there's 2 8mm glass beads, and this is where I add the stainless steel open teardrop charm. So right here. So I've come down to that 8mm glass pearl bead. I've added 1 11/0 seed bead. I've taken my thread through and put my thread through the hole of the open teardrop charm, and then back through that 11/0 seed bead, and then up and through the 3 11/0 seed beads, through the chevron, both the chevrons, and then through the next 3 11/0 seed beads, through the 8mm glass beads, and I continue beads and all the way across. And now I'm going to add a second row here, and this row of 11/0 seed beads is going to take those 2 chevron sequences, the ones closest to the middle, and kind of bring them together and finish them off. I found leaving them open like that, it just made them look too open, like it was unfinished. So here you can see I've added 9 11/0 seed beads, and then another 9 11/0 seed beads on the other side. Now you can add 18 and add this filigree pendant later, it's up to you. And then I went through the next 11/0 seed bead to the right of the next chevron sequence. And then I went across again, bringing my thread through the 8mm glass pearl beads, the 3 11-0 seed beads, the chevron beads. And then again, once you've done this and you've gone through this pearl bead, these 11-0 or these 2 chevrons, now you're going to add your next open teardrop charm, and then you make your way across to the other side. As you can see, I added 1 piece of chain here, put a 5mm jump ring on either side, and then I threaded my chain through these 2 little loops that I made, because I found here this was just hanging out a little too much. Again, I wanted to finish it off, so that's what I did. That's what these loops here are for. You can make them a little bit smaller if you want. I just wanted to make sure that they were going, you know, that the chain was going to make it through, and it did. And then I did 1 more little chain just underneath there, just to add a little more pizzazz to the piece, to, you know, to finish this off, and to have these open teardrop charms just fold in just a little bit. So when you see it on a stand, it actually sits really nicely. Everything is perfectly in line. You know, it sits really nice when you wear it. Actually, these colors look absolutely stunning together, and they really pop for spring. I used number 2 on the list, the 4mm faceted hematite beads. That's these ones here. Those there. Number 4, the 4mm corrugated bicone spacer beads. Now, they're in here, so in between each one of these beads here. I have them in there. Number 10 on your list, the 8mm black agate beads. So that is these ones right down the middle. So you can see some of them have a little bit of gray splash in them, a little bit of white on some of them. Some of them, they do have a little bit a marbly look to them. Number 12 on your list is the 8mm glass pearl beads, and that's these green ones here. Number 17 on your list is the 8mm crystal faceted drop beads. So that's these blue ones here. And of course, I used my own multi-loop links, because they were brass, perfectly matched with this whole, with the whole brass findings. 11-0 seed beads to go around all these beads and cage everything in. 5mm jump rings for the lobster claw, and of course a lobster claw. And 5mm jump rings on the other side. What I like about this piece, and I do have a PDF tutorial to go with it, oh yes, is that you can make it a little bit smaller. So this piece here is only about 4 to 4.5 inches long. Now my wrist, I always wear 7.5 to 7 3/4 bracelet. Unless it's a bangle, then it's a little bit bigger. But for my cuff bracelets, I don't want them super tight, but I don't want them super loose either. But the nice thing about this, you can do this design a little bit smaller, and then you just add your findings at the end to dictate the length of the bracelet that you need. And it's very soft, you know, very comfortable, soft to wear. And I think it turned out really nice. I love it. We are going to get into the PDF tutorial. You can see how I've put everything together. I've put 12 of the 8mm black agate beads on here. Now, I didn't have time, I forgot to show you in the PDF here that I actually took one of those beads out. I didn't have enough of the drop beads, the blue drop beads, to put in here for 12 beads, so I had to take one out. So, and I used all the blue beads that I had. So you're going to have to use 11 unless you decide to use a different bead. And as you can see, I'm putting 3 11-0 seed beads between each one of those beads. And at the end, I added 1 11-0 seed bead, and I went back through the 8mm bead. And basically that just holds that bead in place. And I went through the 2 11-0 seed beads. I added my 8mm crystal drop bead. I liked that the bigger end was facing out. So if you're gonna do the bigger end facing out, make sure they're all facing out. Or if you like them in, make sure they're all facing in. I just found that with this teardrop bead, it just fit better. It was a better fit for the big side to be sitting out. I went through that bead, grabbed an 11-0 seed bead, put it on, went through the drop bead again, and then went through the right hand side of that middle seed bead As you can see here, I'm coming out the other side. And then I went through the next 11-0 seed bead, the 8mm bead, and 2 11-0 seed beads on the other side of that. And I repeated that all the way down. And when I got to the other side, I added that last teardrop bead, went through the rest of the 11-0 seed beads, went through the 8mm seed bead, added my 11-0 seed bead, and went back through that 8mm bead to finish off the other side there. Now I've gone all the way down the other side. I am finished both sides adding the teardrop beads. As you can see, I'm coming out the last teardrop bead. I'm going through the middle 11-0 seed bead. Now I'm going down through the bottom teardrop bead, through the next 11-0 seed bead that's on top of the teardrop bead. And I'm going to start adding my green 8mm glass pearl beads. What I'm doing here is I'm adding one 11-0 seed bead, the pearl 8mm pearl bead, and one 11-0 seed bead, and I'm going through the next 11-0 seed bead on the next teardrop crystal faceted bead, and I'm continuing that all the way across. Now I'm coming to the end of that. I went through that last 11-0 seed bead on top of the pearl of the teardrop crystal bead. I'm going back down through that bead. I'm going to go back through to the other side, through that other teardrop bead, through the other 11-0 seed bead, and I'm going to continue that all the way across the other side. Now that I'm finished both sides, I'm adding 11-0 seed beads, and I'm going to go through that very first seed bead on the other side of the 8mm bead, as you can see here. And now I'm adding another 11-0 seed beads, and I'm going through the first 11-0 seed bead on top of the teardrop bead. Now I'm finished the one side there. Now you can see my needle is sitting on the left hand side of that crystal teardrop bead. You want to add 4 11-0 seed beads, one of the spacer beads, the bicone spacer beads, and 4 11-0 seed beads. You want to bypass the 11-0 seed bead, the 8mm glass pearl bead, and the other 11-0 seed bead to go through the next 11-0 seed bead, the one right in the middle of the faceted crystal teardrop bead. And you want to continue that all the way across. So just continue 4 11-0s, the bicone spacer, 4 11-0s, bypass 11-0, the 8mm, the 11-0 to go through the middle 11-0 seed bead right on top of the teardrop bead. And you make your way all the way across, and then at this end you add your 11-0 seed beads. Go through that 11-0 seed bead at the end, add your next 11-0 seed beads, and then go through the 11-0 right on top of the teardrop crystal bead. And this is where I'm sitting now, so that one row is done. So go across and do that all again with your 4 11-0 seed beads, your bicone spacer bead, 4 11-0s. Do it all the way across until you get to this point. Now I've gone through, when I finished the last sequence of the bicone spacer bead, I went through the 11-0 seed bead on top of the teardrop faceted crystal bead, and now I'm going through all those seed beads that I added at the end there. So I've gone through all those 11. I'm going to go through that 8mm bead down and then through the 2 11-0 seed beads on the right hand side of that. Then I'm going through the next 11-0 seed bead. And now I'm going to add 4 11-0 seed beads onto my thread, and then I'm going to go through that bicone spacer bead, so the one on top there. So add your 4 11-0 seed beads after you've gone through the bicone spacer bead, and then go through the last 3 11-0 seed beads between the 2 pear-shaped crystal faceted beads. Go through that last 8mm bead, go through the 11-0 seed beads on the other side, go through the last 11-0 seed bead till you get to the middle of that pear-shaped crystal bead. Then you go through the 4 11-0 seed beads and the bicone spacer bead. Add 4 11-0 seed beads, and then go back through that 8mm black agate bead. So back the same way that you came. As you can see, my thread is going through it. Add 4 11-0 seed beads, go back through that same bicone spacer bead, and then continue all the way up through those 4 11-0 seed beads, and then down through the 5 11/0 seed beads through the next bicone spacer bead and repeat. So 4 11/0 seed beads, go back through that 8mm black agate, up again, adding 4 11/0 seed beads through that bicone spacer bead, up through the 4 11/0 seed beads, and continue all the way across. At this point, your netting is done. I've cut and tied off my thread because I actually didn't have enough to do anything further, and then we're going to go to the next step. So here you can see that I'm bringing my thread up through all those seed beads that I had put at the end of the bracelet. Here in this frame, I am 4 beads, 4 11/0 seed beads away from that center 11/0 seed bead on top of the 8mm black agate. So back from there, and I'm going to miss that 4th one and go into the next one, adding an 11/0 seed bead first and then going into the next one, as you can see here in this frame, and then continue that across. So as you go through the next 11/0, you miss the next 11/0, you add an 11/0 to your thread, to your needle, and then you go through the next 11/0. And you'd continue that all the way across until you have 5 11/0s that are sticking up. Now, if you follow this direction exactly, that'll make it even for what we're going to do next. So you can see here in this frame that one sticking up 11/0 is right on top of that middle 11/0. So you want to make sure that you have that one there, 2 on one side, 2 on the other. Now I'm going to start adding the multi-loop links. I want to come back around so that my thread is coming out that first 11/0 seed bead that's sticking up. I'm going to add 1 4mm faceted hematite bead, 1 11/0 seed bead, and then I'm going to put my thread through the very first loop on the multi-loop link there. Then come back around, go through that 11/0, the 4mm faceted with your thread, as you can see here in this frame. Then you go through the 11/0 right under the 4mm faceted bead. Go through the next 11/0 seed bead on the first row, and then the next seed bead that's sticking up with your thread. And then you continue that all the way across, adding your 4mm and your 11/0 seed bead, going through the loops of this multi-loop link. And then as you get to the end, you can see that I've added on 11 11/0 seed beads. And as you can see, my needle is going through the 4 seed beads right next to the bicone spacer bead. So you do that. Then I'm going to make my way across. So I'm going through the 4 seed beads on the right hand side of that bicone, and then going through the next 4 11/0 seed beads, as you can see in this frame here. Just follow that. So I'm just making my way across to the other side, and then add another 11 11/0 seed beads, come up and go through that 4mm faceted hematite bead. Now this is where we're sitting. That end is done. I just went up the 4mm faceted beads, the 11/0, around the first loop, and I went across and just reinforced. I made sure that I went through each of these loops twice with my thread, all the way across again, and then I just trimmed off my thread, added a 5mm jump ring and my lobster claw. Just do exactly the same thing to the other side of your bracelet. And as you can see in this frame here, I've done the same exact thing. And then I've doubled up on my 5mm jump rings. So 2, 2, and 2. So for each jump ring, I've added 2. And I've added 3 sets of the 2. Now this I did specifically for the size of my bracelet. And I really like the way this cuff bracelet looks, the way that it is netted and caged in there. Very pretty. Now this pendant was made with that bracelet in mind. So the bracelet that you just saw. So I used the number 1 5.5 by 6mm hematite man-made chevron beads. I used the last 2 that I had because I used these on an upcoming piece I'll show you, but I only had 2 left. So this is where they ended up. I used the 4mm faceted hematite beads. So that's these ones here. You can see in there. Maybe I'll bring it a little closer. Right in here. I used number 3 3x2mm brass oval chain. So right here is what I had left of the brass oval chain. So I just cut it in half and used it in this pendant here. Number 4, I use a 4mm corrugated bicone spacer beads. I love these things. So basically the same as a bracelet design, the corrugated spacer beads, bicone beads went into this area here. Number 5, I used the 8mm white shell pearl beads. So that's these white ones here. Number 9, I use a 6x4mm crystal faceted rondo beads, and I used these to finish off the chain. I used number 12, the 8mm glass pearl beads. So that's these green ones here. And number 16, the 10mm black and white agates. So that's these big ones here. These are 10mm bead, faceted bead, very beautiful. And for my own stash, I used the brass memory wire. So two pieces of the brass memory wire. I used the 11/0 seed beads to go on that memory wire to separate the beads. I used 5mm jump rings to put everything together, and of course here as well. And my own loop links. Now these I got in a box from Amazon. I will leave everything linked below where you can get all this stuff. But honestly, you can use whatever you would like to use here. But I thought these just brought a really nice look to this whole piece. And of course, my lobster claw. So I do have a little tutorial for this piece as well, because this here is pretty much the same as a bracelet. There's just a couple of differences, not a lot, but just a little bit. So as you can see in this frame, I've used the big 10mm beads, and I've put 3 beads inside, 3 11/0 seed beads. So basically all you have to do is follow what I did for the bracelet, only with 4 beads. Then come around, added the green 8mm beads, come back around. Now the only difference here is what you'll see here. When I added the white pearl beads, instead of using only 1, so on the left top hand side, you'll see that I used 3 11/0 seed beads. I added the pearl bead, but then I added 2 11/0 seed beads to the other side instead of just 1 like we did in the bracelet. Went through that 11/0 seed bead, 2 11/0 seed beads, the pearl bead, 2 11/0 seed beads, and then you go down through the green beads all the way across, and you do the same thing along the bottom. So that's the only thing that's different about this particular pattern as opposed to what the bracelet is when you add those white pearl beads. At the ends, I added 12 beads because now you're dealing with a 10mm bead in the middle instead of an 8mm bead. So you want to add a couple extra 11/0 seed beads. So I added 12 11/0 seed beads, went through that 11/0 seed bead on the top, and continued on the same as what you would do with a bracelet. I did that all the way around and then tied off. What you want to do is make 2 of those. And now we are going to be adding the memory wire. So this is basically what I decided I was going to do with memory wire. Just put it on there to give you an idea of what I was thinking about. This will be the top piece of the memory wire. So it's going to be quite a bit smaller than what you see here, but this is basically gives you an idea of my thought process. Basically, this is where you want your memory wire to be sitting inside on the top loop of the loop link. And now here I'm making my loop at the end of the memory wire. I want it to be inside of this loop link. So you can see here, that's what I've done. Now in this frame, you're going to notice that the memory wire is a little bit longer than what the necklace actually has, because when I added the second memory wire, I had to make the first one a little bit smaller for it to sit right. So just keep that in mind, that you want this one with the chevron beads on it to be quite a bit smaller. In this frame, it was a little bit too long, so I did cut the loop off and then redid another loop, made it quite a bit smaller. And then I added the beads that I wanted to the lengthly memory wire. So that was the bicone spacer bead. This is all I had left with the bicone spacer beads. I used my 11/0 seed beads, 2 in the middle of each of those, and then just used the rest of whatever I had. If you want to add more, you want to add less. It really depends on what you want to look at. And then I just did my loops inside the loop link, the 6 6-hole loop link. And this longer piece was approximately 3 to 3.5 inches. Again, this is totally up to you on how you want the piece to sit. If you want it to be more of a half moon shape, which is what I decided to do, I left the bottom one quite a bit longer than the top one. If you don't want so much of a half moon shape, then you cut the bottom one a little bit shorter. So again, you just gotta experiment a little bit with your memory wire, see where you want it to sit. But basically, there is no making a mistake on this. You can do whatever you like. You can have it really long, you can have it really short. And now that I've got that main memory wire loop, 2 loops done, and added to the 6 loop links, now I'm ready to add the 2 pieces of the two focal points that I'd made there. As you can see on the right hand side, I had a long piece of thread left over from that particular focal. I just took that, I took it over to the 4th bead. So I went on the right hand side of the 4th bead, come out, and then I added my 4mm faceted hematite bead, went through that first hole, as you can see in the loop link, and then came around and went back through the 4mm faceted bead, went all the way across to the middle bead, so that very first 11/0 seed bead right on top of the 10mm bead, added my next 4mm faceted bead, did the loop, came back down through that faceted bead, and then entered the opposite side of that 11/0 seed bead, and then went 5 over, including that middle bead. And then did the same thing. I added my faceted bead, went through the loop, come back down around, and now I'm making my way down the other side. So basically you do that on both sides. I went through some of the beads just to tie off, so you can pretty much take your thread anywhere you want to, and I just tied off in the back. Then here I just added the 6x4mm rondelles, added one 11/0 seed bead in between there, and just made it as long as I needed it to be for this portion of the necklace. And then here I used, like I said, my last bit of chain and just looped it around there, put a 5mm jump ring, and then just added it to the loop at the end. And the nice thing about doing it this way, you can make this part as short or as long as you want. So if you want it to be a little bit shorter, that's not a problem. And then if you find that your necklace is a little bit too short, you just start adding jump rings to it. You can do 2 and 2 like I did with the bracelet, and you can make it as long as or as short as you like. So here we have another beaded bracelet. Yes, I have a PDF for this one as well, which we will go through in just a minute. This one I was calling my chevron bracelet because I used pretty much all of my chevron beads went into this particular bracelet. This is very pretty, very easy, you guys, and it doesn't take long to make. It's a very easy bracelet to make and very pretty as well. Number 1, 5.5 by 6mm hematite man-made chevron beads. So that's these blue ones here. Number 2, the 4mm faceted hematite beads. That's these 4 inside of those chevron beads. Number 5, 8mm white shell pearl beads. That's these guys here. Number 6, the 16 by 18mm 18 karat gold plated swirl teardrop toggle clasp. So that's this one here. This is the only toggle clasp that actually came in the box. And then put everything together with my 11/0 seed beads. So let's get to the tutorial. I have a piece of thread that's about 3 feet long. No longer than that, honestly, that's pretty long, but about 3 feet long is what I have. So I put on the 4mm faceted hematite beads and went around a second time and went back through 2 of the hematite beads just to create the square or circle that I'm making. So there we have it there. Pull it tight and this is what you should see. Now I've added a chevron bead and an 11/0 seed bead to my thread, coming back around, missing the 11/0 seed bead and going straight through that chevron bead to the next hematite bead. So the next 4mm crystal. Do that again all the way around. Chevron, 11/0 seed bead, miss the 11/0 seed bead, back through the chevron and into the next 4mm hematite bead. And when you come to the last one, do the same exact thing. Go through the hematite bead when you're done and go through that next chevron. So the first chevron that you've added. Then you go through the 11/0 seed bead that's on top of that chevron. Now you add 3 11-0 seed beads, the white shell bead, the white 8 millimeter, and then 3 11-0 seed beads, and go through, bypass and go through the next 11-0 seed bead that's sitting on top of the next chevron. So when you've added that, as you can see here, I've just flipped my work here so you can see what I'm doing. I've gone through that chevron, through the next 4 millimeter faceted bead, and through the next chevron to the left. Now if you're right-handed, it'll be to the right. Next, go through the next 11-0 seed bead, and then do the same exact thing. So 3 11-0 seed beads, your 8 millimeter shell bead, and 3 11-0 seed beads, and go through the next 11-0 seed bead on the next chevron. And there you have your first sequence. Now you don't have to cut off the thread here. I just left the thread sitting, and I made another square sequence, as you can see beside it. And as I've come out the last chevron, 11-0 seed bead sequence, I've added 3 11-0 seed beads, and I've gone through the first square that I made, and I'm going through the 8 millimeter shell bead with my thread. Then I've added 3 11-0 seed beads, and I'm going to go through the next 11-0 seed bead on the little square that I made to add the two of them together. And you go through your next 4 millimeter faceted bead, through the chevron to the left of that, and the 11-0 seed bead. Flip the other one around, the other sequence around that you just added to, and then add 3 11-0 seed beads, go through that white 8 millimeter shell bead, add 3 of your 11-0 seed beads, and add it to the last one, and go through that 11-0 seed bead on the top of that chevron, and that'll give you this. So you just keep adding on the same way. You add your square, you make your square, and then you start adding on the 8 millimeter beads. Just keep adding them on like that. It's very, very simple. And this is some of the sections that I have done already. So again, I've made my square, added it to the right hand side. So 3 11-0 seed beads, go through that bead, the 8 millimeter bead, 3 11-0 seed beads, back down through the other chevron. So in my design, I've added 7 of the 8 millimeter shell beads. So here I'm doing the final 8 millimeter shell bead on the one side. So I'm just adding the shell bead, the 3 11-0s, the big 8 millimeter 3 11-0s, back down through that 11-0 on the other side of the chevron, on the top side of the other chevron. Now, the only thing that bothers me about this box this month, and they've done this a couple of times, is that they give you this beautiful toggle clasp, but with only one jump ring, which doesn't really make any sense since you need 2 jump rings. So I wish they'd stop attaching the I wish they'd stop attaching the toggle clasps together with just one jump ring. You honestly need 2. So this one here was a little bit thicker and a little bit smaller than what I had in my stash. So I actually couldn't use this jump ring to put this all together. So I really wish they'd stop doing that and just give us the 2 jump rings, but it is what it is. Now this is a medium size bracelet, so you can add more or less as you need. Just make sure that you measure the toggle clasp, integrated with the design that you're doing, so that you have the proper size that you need for your wrist. So before I add the toggle clasp, I decided to do the bicone top first, so the bicone beads. I'm going to add the bicone beads. So what I've done is I've gone through with a new piece of thread, I've gone through the 4 11-0 seed beads, as you can see in this clip here, on top of the one chevron. I go through the chevron, and now I'm adding 1 11-0 seed bead, one of the bicone spacer beads, 11-0 seed bead, and I go down in that same line down the next chevron. So now I've gone through my 4 11-0 seed beads. I go up through that next 8 millimeter white shell bead, and as you can see, I'm going through now the other 4 11-0 seed beads to the left of that same shell bead. Go through that chevron bead, and then you add your sequence again. So your 11-0 seed bead, your bicone spacer bead, 11-0 seed bead, and in that line you go through the next chevron bead, and you just continue across like that. So I flipped my work around, and now I want to add 1 11-0 seed bead in between all those little spaces on top on each side of the 8 millimeter shell beads. So now I'm going to go through the 4 11-0 seed beads. I'm going to add my 1 11-0 seed bead, and then go through the other 4 seed beads, and then you just make your way across like you see in here. So you go through your 4 millimeter and the next chevron, and through your 4 seed beads, and then you add your 11-0 seed bead, and you go all the way across doing the same exact thing. And you can see here in this frame that it actually fills in and finishes off this design here. You see on the top there's a hole, like there's a space there, and I don't like that, so I like to go back and take that extra little time to add the next seed bead. Just finishes it off. Now I'm going to add my toggle clasp. So at the end here you can see that I'm adding 6 11/0 seed beads. I'm going to take my thread and go through the loop of the toggle clasp, and I'm going to take one of those 11/0 seed beads. I'm going to go back through it, pull it tight, and then add 5 11/0 seed beads and go through the next 4 11/0 seed beads on the other side of the 8mm shell bead. And you can make your way all the way across to the other side. Here I've added 15 11/0 seed beads to the other side of the toggle clasp. And then I've made my loop around the toggle clasp, and I'm going all the way through all those beads. I've gone through 10 of those 11/0 seed beads, and I'm going to add 5 11/0 seed beads and then start going through the other 4 seed beads that are already attached onto the bracelet. And this is my finished bracelet. Okay, and now we're going to talk about these cute little matching earrings. So same as a bracelet, I used the 5.5 by 6mm hematite man-made chevron beads. Same thing, so I did the square here. The bicone spacer bead, the 8mm shell bead, and of course my 11/0 seed beads, and this really pretty 9.5 by 8mm gold-plated brass filigree teardrop charm. And they gave us 2 in the box, so of course they had to be earrings, right? And that was number 8 on your list. So basically you do exactly the same thing for the earrings with this square and one of the beads. So as you can see, I did the square. I added 1 of the 8mm shell beads, same as you did before, right? So you add 3 the 8mm shell bead and then 3 11/0 seed beads. And what I did was I went through that 11/0 seed bead on top of that chevron, came back around again through the 4mm faceted bead, the chevron bead, the 4 11/0 seed beads. I went through that 8mm shell bead again. This just encases the 8mm bead properly. Then went back up through that chevron, added my 11/0 seed bead, the bicone spacer bead, 11/0 seed bead, through that chevron, through that 11/0 seed bead on top of the chevron, and then added 8 11/0 seed beads and went through the next 11/0 on top of the other chevron to finish off where my ear wire is going to be. And just tied off everything, and I went and put my ear wire between the 10 11/0 seed beads, so 5 on one side, 5 on the other, and then used my 5mm jump ring to add the filigree teardrop charm to the bottom, and there you have it. Very easy earring. These are really cute. I just fell in love with these. They sit so nicely on the ear, and again they're very light. You don't have to worry about them, you know, dragging your ear down, which is something I do not like. And the nice thing is that these match perfectly with your bracelet. So last but not least, you're probably wondering what happened to the stainless steel open teardrop charms. These are the last 2 open teardrop charms that I had in my collection. So this is number 11, 17 by 11mm stainless steel open teardrop charms. So that's these little, I'll get you closer here. So that's these little gold or brass colored teardrop loops. I used number 13, so the 2 17.5 by 13mm onyx brass faceted teardrop charms. So that's these ones here in the back. And then I used number 3 by 2mm brass oval chain. So basically just cut 2 pieces that were exactly the same size, put on my own ear wires, attached everything with 1 jump ring, and the most simple and cute earring ever. I just wanted to add just a little something to this faceted bead here, and I just thought the way they hang is actually quite pretty. They look really beautiful, and they go with any of the pieces that were made here today. I enjoy making these chain, you know, this type of earring. It hangs really nicely from the ear. very light to wear, and very simplistic. Sometimes the simpler you make an earring, the nicer it is, especially when you have bigger pieces like the pendants and the bracelet that was made. They're quite a bit bigger pieces, more statement pieces. So you can make yourself, you know, something a little more simple. I have long hair, and I just like using a longer chain so that they dangle down a little bit further. All right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope the tutorials were easy to follow along. I'm sure they were. If you guys try some of them, please let me know. Tag me on Instagram so I can see your beautiful work. Don't forget to like this video if you did like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell for being notified of upcoming videos. Head over to my website, sign up for my newsletter, which I will be becoming more active on. It's been beautiful here with so much snow. I've been trying to skidoo my little heart out before all the snow goes, which it seems to be going now. So I can spend a little more time working on my website, which is what I really should be doing. You guys have a great day, and I would love to see you back here for my next one. Bye.